Welcome to the Know It's Some podcast, bringing you the widest variety of conversational interviews for a well-rounded perspective on life. Because while it's true nobody likes a know-it-all, it's also good to know it's some. Here's your host, Steve Platt.
That's right. Welcome back to the Know It's Some podcast. I'm your host, Steve Platt, and this week is for all my music lovers, all the listeners here who love music, because we're going to be talking with Mr. John Lynskey. He is the chief archivist and historian for the Allman Brothers Band, and he is the director of the Allman Brothers Band Museum and Foundation there in Macon, Georgia. He pretty much wrote the book on the Allman Brothers, literally. He knows everything that has to do with the band, its members, its history, its music. It's just an incredible wealth of knowledge that he possesses, and it was a true honor having him on the show. Folks in Explorer Nation, all my Columbus listeners, they know that Mr. Lynskey is a legend, but he's so much more than that. Just a really great guy, gracious with his time, and I was grateful to have the time to speak with him. And this conversation was a real fun one. The Allman Brothers Band is one of the greatest bands of all time. Their At Fillmore East album, in my opinion, is the greatest live album of all time. So to speak with somebody who knows so much about the band and has been so close with them for so long was just a real treat. If you are a member of Explorer Nation or you're a huge Allman Brothers fan, make sure that you go to Good Pods. That is the listening platform that allows you to rank individual episodes and give it a 5-star ranking. Show Mr. Lynskey some love. Folks, I'm not going to hold you away from this interview any longer. Without further ado, my friend, John Lynskey. Mr. John Lynskey, welcome to the Know It's Some podcast. I appreciate you being here today. How are you doing?
Steve, it's my pleasure to be here. Doing great in idyllic Macon, Georgia. Enjoying the pace of life up here. And thank you for having me again, brother.
No, it's an honor, sincerely. Nobody knows more about the Allman Brothers than you do. What's your official title there at the big house in Macon?
I am the chief archivist and historian of the band. So on my better days, I know a little. Yeah.
You've been involved with them for quite some time and had a number of titles revolving around the Allman Brothers. The Allman Brothers Band being singularly unique. I don't know if that phrase is redundant or not, but we'll roll with it.
I like it, yeah.
You know, they are so many things. You can't peg them to a genre. They're when you listen to them, they're rhythm and blues, they're jazz, they're country, they're rock. They're not any one thing. They're just music in general. A band that jams, right? And when you hear their music, there's a range to their songs. You can hear songs like Jessica and Ramblin' Man, but that will only paint so much of the picture until you hear songs like Not My Cross to Bear or Soul Shine, and then it's a completely different sound. You know, the music doesn't all sound the same, like when you're listening to Red Hot Chili Peppers, and I know I'm going to get hate mail for that, but I love the Chili Peppers, but all their music sounds the same. You don't get that with the Allman Brothers. When were you first introduced to their music? Like when did you first hear them or get into them? Who introduced you to the Allman Brothers music?
Well, Steve, you know what you just said is incredibly accurate. It's like the band, somebody threw all these elements into a cauldron, and this witch's brew came out of blues, jazz, R&B, psychedelic rock, country, and somehow this very diverse mix worked. And when you combine the considerable talents of each member, they became an incredible lineup, and a lineup that changed, yes, varied, yes, but for 45 years, there were no better musicians in a band than the members of the Allman Brothers Band. And as for me, I was very lucky. When I was 12 in 1972, we moved into a new neighborhood. It's in Palmetto Bay now. And I was the youngest kid in the neighborhood by 2-3 years. You know, and at our age, 2 or 3 years doesn't mean anything. But when you're 12 and everybody else is 14 or 15, it makes a huge difference. And these guys in the neighborhood taught me a lot. They taught me a lot about sports, you know, but they also were way into their music. And the early 70s was a great time for music. So I got an encyclopedic A to Z lesson in music. And ironically, almonds start with A. And you know, I got heavily dosed on the Fillmore East record. And that was the beginning of everything. And while my music tastes are very eclectic, you know, from America to ZZ Top and everything in between, the almonds always resonated with me. And I carried it with me into high school at Columbus, into college. Even after they broke up, I continued to listen to their music. And, you know, I was a history teacher. I'm a history guy. So I studied their history. And it wasn't that easy back then. You know, there was
Yeah.
no
You
internet, there
couldn't
was no
put a
Wikipedia.
Wikipedia page
Yeah.
or just Google articles.
Yeah, it was hard. But I learned as much as I possibly could. And I found their story to be fascinating, you know, triumph and tragedy, and overcoming hardships and beating the odds, and using music as an outlet for emotions, plus their whole social aspect. They were, you know, when you look at the original Allman Brothers band, you had five white hippies and a black guy
Right.
living in Macon, Georgia in 1969, in their own way, because music is colorblind after all. They helped integrate in their own way the Deep South. You
Yeah.
know, five freaks and a black guy, they
Yeah.
turned some heads, and they didn't care, because music is music and it's a universal language. And I was fascinated by that as well. So anyway,
I
fast
bet they
forward.
turned some heads. I bet Macon, hadn't seen anything really like it, and they might not have been as well received by some when they first came to town.
They were definitely not well received.
But they didn't leave it how they found it, right? I mean, Macon, and the South, like you mentioned, was kind of transformed by their presence and by their music. I mean, to me, the two best things coming out of Georgia are pecans and almonds. And certainly they made an impact.
They did. And you know, just on a sidebar, they never embraced that whole Southern rock thing. They actually disliked that term immensely.
Yeah.
They didn't like the term jam band either. They were just a band that happened to jam, but they did a lot of other things. And they never embraced that whole, you know, Molly Hatchet, Skinnerd, Outlaws, wave the rebel flag and all that. They weren't about that. They were
Right.
closer to Miles Davis than
Yeah.
they were to a rebel flag. So although they were the first band to make it from the South, they never bought into that whole. They were the antithesis of that, actually.
Well, didn't they play gigs opening for folks like BB King and stuff? I mean,
Absolutely.
So
Yeah, they preferred to open for either BB King or Albert King or Freddie King. You know, they were serious
Martin
musicians.
Luther King.
Yeah, they showed up and they played in the clothes they were wearing, and they weren't into fashion. They just got up and played. And if you didn't appreciate serious music, then it probably wasn't the band for you. But a lot of people do.
I guess my question is when
Yeah.
or how did you become involved with them?
So in 1989, the band had been broken up for most of the 80s, you know, disco, then techno, and all that stuff. But 89 was their 20th anniversary. Epic Records put out a big box set to commemorate that. They talked the guys into doing a reunion tour. It was basically a moneymaker.
Right.
But you know, the winds of change were blowing in 1989, and a lot of bands from that era were getting back together.
Yeah.
The Stones, Jefferson Airplane, the Doobie Brothers, all these bands, it just seemed 89 was the year, and the tour went so well that they said, hell, let's do this again. And I went to one of those shows at Sunrise Musical. It's no longer there, a great venue up in Lauderdale. And I knew who their tour manager was. It was crazy. Like I said, pre-internet and all that, but I knew Gentleman's name is Kirk West. He's one of my dear friends now. And I knew who he was. I saw him in the parking lot. And I walked up to him and I said, "You're Kirk West." And he said, "Yeah, on my better days, I'm Kirk West." And we started talking and talking and talking. And he says, "You know a lot." I said, I know a little. He said, "Look, we're always looking for people that appreciate the history of this band." So we stayed in touch. My big opportunity came. The band launched a music magazine, their own magazine called Hitting the Note. And I wrote an article. They liked it. Eventually, I became editor-in-chief, and Hitting the Note really expanded. I was able to interview all kinds of people, from Carlos Santana to David Crosby, but it always revolved around the Allmans. Teaching school, as you know, I did, allowed me to go on the road with them in the summer. I was selling merch, I was doing publicity, and my role expanded and expanded and expanded, and I became sort of the unofficial historian of the band. Got involved with writing liner notes for albums, archival releases from the vault, and that is how I got started with them. And then in terms of the museum, Kirk West, the gentleman I just mentioned, in 1993, he actually bought the big house down here in Macon, Georgia. Kirk and his wife lived in Chicago, but he felt that that house in Macon was too important to be overlooked, because no band has, there are no other band house museums in the country, Graceland aside. The Dead had a house in San Francisco. The Airplane had a house. Skinner had a house. The Doobie Brothers had a house. I can keep going. None of those houses are museums. So long story short, Kirk and his wife moved down to Macon, convinced the owners of the big house, as it's called, because it is a very big house, to sell it to them. Kirk set up his huge memorabilia collection in there, and it became an unofficial museum. And they didn't have any idea what a mecca it was going to become. So after about 15 years of doing that, Kirk's wife, Kirsten, finally said, "I can't have people showing up, knocking on the door at all hours, wanting to walk through the house." So they decided to sell the house and their collection to a foundation. I've been on the board of directors from the very beginning. The band was totally behind it. All the guys, Greg, Butch, JMO, Dickie, Warren, everybody was behind it. Bert Holman, the band's manager, channeled a lot of money. The house was purchased, renovated, set up for museum displays. We collected stuff, purchased stuff. Stuff was donated. You'd be surprised, Steve, how many people call and say, "Hey, I was up in my old man's attic and I found this. I found that. Do you want it?" And so we opened for business in 2009, and people at first said, "You'll last 6 months." Well, here we are now, the largest tourist attraction in Macon, Georgia. And we're very proud of that. And we continue to grow and expand and survived COVID. And it is the coolest rock and roll museum about a band that exists in the country. So
Absolutely. I mean, I've seen some really cool stuff that you've posted to social media, and I encourage anybody listening to check it out. Some history in those walls. Let me ask the historian, the At Fillmore East album. I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's the greatest live album of all time. I really do feel it that way.
Yeah, but, you're not on a limb when you say that. You're really absolutely correct when you say that.
Yeah, but what's interesting to me is they had been together for a while, had a couple albums before that, and some of the songs on previous albums, like Midnight Rider on Idlewood South, they were great songs, among their greatest hits now, and look back upon really fondly. But it seems like that live album, that Fillmore East, it kind of, I'm not saying that the band wasn't on the map, but that whole put them on the map thing, it took them to like the next level, that album. What can you tell me about how important that album is in the history of the band?
That album is everything. It's a seminal album for the band, because they were a band They were a performance band. They were never a studio band. Did they have some good songs in the studio? Yeah, but they were all about playing live. It's what they did. And there was this Zen-like nonverbal communication between the original six that had to be, you can't describe it, it can only be experienced. And it all came through on Fillmore East because they liked to play long. They liked to improvise. They played the same songs, but they never played them the same way twice. And Fillmore East captured that, the ability for them to improvise, the genius of Dwayne Allman and Dickie Betts, their interplay, the vocals of Greg Allman, the bass playing of Barry Oakley, and the dual drumming of J-Mo and Butch Trucks. You mix that together, and the creativity level heard on that album, it brought to the attention of the entire nation just how good these guys were at their craft. Again, studio is fine, but they were all about and remained playing live. It's what they did. And are there other great live albums? Yeah. Is there anything that compares to Fillmore East? No. And after 50 years, I think it has clearly withstood the test of time.
You know, I listened to Mountain Jam, which someone was telling me is not on at Fillmore East. I think they were saying it was on Eat a Peach, but
yeah, but it was recorded during the Fillmore run. Yes,
in March of 71. Okay,
correct.
Yeah, you know, I listened to it, and I don't think there's a better jam session that I've ever heard in my life. In terms of, they were all like on the same wavelength. You know, it's hard to explain, but like they were riding the same wave spiritually. And I know that sounds super hippie of me, but it just, if you listen to that, it's special. These guys were like family. This whole band, you have the Allman Brothers, right? But then you have the Toller Brothers at times, and you know, the Truck family. You have him and his nephews involved. It really is kind of a family. It seems like you've joined that family. How important is that to the music, the family like atmosphere of the Allman Brothers band?
Oh, I think you hit the nail on the head, and that's where the Big House played a huge role. When the original lineup lived there from the years 70 to 73, it was all about family. It was all about community. It was all about you said it, the hippie family spirit. And they were like brothers because they lived in a bubble. You know, we talk about pandemic bubbles. Well, in Macon, Georgia, it was them against everybody else for a while there. And yes, when you share something like that, I guess other than, guys in combat, you can't grow closer than that. When you spend 300 days on the road together in 1970, there's a bond there. And yes, in that Mountain Jam, that's the prime example of that. When they come out of the drum solo, and
Oh yeah,
for the next 11 minutes, you've never heard music played like that. Totally
it's incredible.
improvised, totally non-verbal communication, not just sensing what the other guy was going to do, knowing what the other guy was going to do. It's teamwork, and you and I both love sports. Music and teamwork, there is that visceral connection. And when you know what your teammate is going to do without having to think, well, that's how they did it on stage. So you hit the nail on the head with that.
Absolutely, absolutely incredible. You know, that I don't know if this is fair to say, but I'll put it out there this way. It's been said that the band lived pretty hard.
Yeah.
You know, definitely some hard living and some stories there at the Big House and throughout their tours. And in that, the band kind of was beset by tragedy a few times.
Yeah.
Notably, motorcycle accidents pretty close together.
Yeah.
Dwayne Allman and Barry Oakley. I wanted to ask you, as the historian, was there ever a doubt within the band whether they would continue without their leader, without Dwayne, when that accident occurred?
To your point, yes, they lived as hard as they played. There's no question. And they had a bit of an outlaw attitude when they were on the road. And Dwayne Allman was a true Scorpio. Everything he did 1,000%. From playing to partying to reading and learning to riding his motorcycle. And, you know, when he was killed in October of 71, of course, there was that immediate reaction of, you know, we're done, we're finished, we can't go on, because he was the undisputed leader, the founder. It was his vision that carried them forward. But then they all realized two things. A, he wouldn't want them to quit. And B, it kept him, the only way they could keep from going insane was to keep playing.
Right.
And they did. And they channeled their grief and their anger and their frustration into the music. They didn't even think about replacing him. Didn't make any sense. There was no one going to step into those shoes. So they carried on as a 5-man lineup, and Dickie Betts and Barry Oakley did an amazing job filling the gap. Oh, they all did, filling that unfillable gap. But then, unfortunately, like you said, 13 months later, 3 blocks apart, Barry Oakley, the bass player, phenomenal musician. And the big house was his house, by the way. His name was on the lease. It was his family. Yeah, it was the Oakley family home, and everybody else used it as a hub of operations. But, you know, Barry and Dwayne were killed 13 months apart, 3 blocks from each other in Macon, Georgia. You can stand at one site and see the other site. They were both 24 years old. And that was a double blow, an incredibly hard blow. You know, it marked the end of the band's time at the big house when Barry died. But you know what? They soldiered on. They recreated themselves. They kept going. And there's been many iterations of the band, lineup changes, you know, and ironically, fittingly, they always found the best players. Rolling Stones, top 100 guitar players of all time. 4 guys are from the Allman Brothers band.
Yep.
No other band has more than 2. The Allmans had 4. Dwayne Allman, Dickie Betts, Warren Haynes, Derek Trucks. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Come on. So, yes.
Is Dickie Betts in good relations with the remaining members or the newer members of the band?
Dickie has always been a bit of a lone wolf. You know, he's enjoying retirement. He lives in Sarasota.
He's down the road from me. Not literally, but he's not too far.
No, you know, you've got a legend in your area there.
For sure.
And, you know, he left the band under maybe not the best circumstances, but before Greg Allman died, they patched up their differences. You know, he's played with the other guys at various times. But Dickie at this stage is happily retired and enjoying the good life. You know, so these things happen in rock and roll.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, you mentioned Greg passing. What's interesting is I didn't realize just how many lives he had touched personally and how many people showed up at his funeral. I believe Jimmy Carter went, Cher, even though they were only married like 9 days. You know, she went to the funeral from what I hear. Seems like his passing really hit a lot of people hard.
It did. I mean, all of his ex-wives except one showed up. President Carter showed up. It was, you know, working. I don't think I mentioned one of the things I did was I helped Greg write his autobiography, My Cross to Bear. And that was quite an experience because, interestingly enough, as you said, Greg Allman touched a lot of lives. And there's a lot of young girls named, or older women for that matter, too, named Melissa because of Greg Allman. You know, and finding out that Greg was the antithesis of a rock star. He was a rock star, but he was shy.
Yeah.
You don't usually use the word shy with rock star. Greg would be perfectly comfortable in front of 20,000 people. He'd be incredibly uncomfortable in front of 20 people. He just didn't do the small talk thing very well. He was very private. The loss of his brother, the marriage to Cher and all the negative publicity he got from that. Greg didn't open up to a lot of people. So to go through the process of writing the book with him was something that, I treasure and I'm very proud of. But yes, to your point, it touched a lot of people and it brought a lot of people back together when he passed.
Gotcha. So if people go and visit the big house right now in Macon, what can they expect? What are they going to find when they make the drive up there?
They're going to find an unbelievable experience. It doesn't matter if you're 70 or 17. Walking into that house, there's a vibe that you feel as soon as you come in. It is a big house, for one thing, so it takes a while to go through all the exhibits. The ground floor is all music stuff, everything, guitars, amps, equipment, clothing, lyric sheets, all that. What I think people will find fascinating is when they go up on the second floor, in that the second floor has been recreated as much as possible to what it looked like when the band lived there. Dwayne Allman's bedroom, Barry and Linda Oakley's bedroom. Linda, Barry's widow, kept so much stuff and gave it all to the museum that their bedroom has been recreated to essentially what it was like when they lived there. There's a party room upstairs called the Casbah room. And again, perfectly recreated. If the Casbah could talk, it would tell some interesting stories. So again, if you're a hardcore fan or a casual fan, just walking into something like this, I've seen people crying when they get there. It's like they've made it to Mecca. We've had people come from Australia, Japan, Brazil, Finland, Czechoslovakia, England, Germany, you name it. And why else would somebody from Osaka, Japan, come to Macon, Georgia? That ain't gonna happen.
I can't think of a reason except to check out the big house. What really impresses me is all the different things you can do there. I've seen, you've done a great job of showcasing it online, and so I've seen people do like their senior picks. I've seen this massive event space outside where you can, if you wanted to hold a reunion or a reception for a wedding, or even a wedding itself, if you're that big of an Allman Brothers fan, I mean, you can do that there. You have so much space to kind of rent out. It's kind of cool that people can utilize it as more than just a museum,
Oh, absolutely. We've had a lot of weddings there. We had a 60th birthday party there the other night. And, 60 years old, guys in the perfect age group. I mean, he died and gone to heaven. And so just to see people, and what's great about it, Steve, is everybody's there for the same reason. There's no bullshit there, because you don't have any contrarians. You don't have anybody that doesn't want to be there. And it's so important for people that the vibe is positive all the time. And it's great to interact. I love it when the young kids come in. I get it when somebody my age comes in. But even, I'm talking a lot younger than you. I'm talking 17 years old. Why are you here? And it's the same story. Well, my old man turned me on to them, and I want to be a musician, and there's nobody better than these guys. So you have it.
Not lying. Vinyl records have made a huge comeback. A lot of people are now pouring into older TV shows because they stream their TV through the internet, right? Everybody's kind of digging back because, to be truthful, the quality has gone down in a lot of things over the years. I don't know that people make music anymore as often. There's these 3-minute repetitive, sound bites that they call songs, but you listen to the Allman Brothers, that's real music. And I'll tell you, I want to say a young guy, it's becoming less true each day that I'm a young guy, but as a young guy, as I'm driving at night, right, I'll put on like Soul Shine or something, right? And there's nothing better to drive to than that kind of music. And depending on the mood you're in, you could find a song in the Allman Brothers catalog that, is just perfect. And so I think it's just really, really cool. Where can people find information about the big house? Where can people find you? online or on social media?
One place to start, allmanbrothersband.com, to learn more about the band. And again, the support the band has had for the museum has been essential. So allmanbrothersband.com. The museum itself is the bighousemuseum.com. And we've got a very nice website. We've got a tremendous online gift shop where there's so many cool things that you can purchase, and you can get a virtual tour. You can get an idea of what you're going to see. But again, until you step foot in there, till you arrive at 2321 Vineville Avenue, it's something that everybody that's any kind of music fan or that genre of music should do. And it's the great thing about Macon, it's on the way to everywhere. The museum is right off I-75. It's 2 minutes off of 75 on Vineville Avenue. And we're open Thursdays through Sundays to the general public. But if somebody is traveling and, they can get a hold of us, I can't tell you how many times. Listen, man, I planned my whole trip around this, yada, yada, yada. I'm from Canada, please. So we'll open it up for people, because you don't want people to miss out on that. And the cool thing is we change things out. We get new stuff all the time. We get new merch. And so we try to keep it evolving because we want people to come back. And what's really cool, Steve, it's one thing to have, I get why the people are coming from Finland. Okay. I get that. But when the locals start showing up, then you're doing something right. Because you know how local people are. People in Philadelphia don't go see the Liberty Bell. People who live in Miami don't go to the beach, know. And so when people from Macon come by, that's a really good sign. So from Minnesota to Macon and anywhere in between, come visit the Big House. It'll be something you'll never forget.
That's awesome. And you're on Instagram, JP Lynskey, correct?
JP Lynskey, Lynskey. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on. Kirk said that you know it all or you know a lot rather when it comes to the Allman Brothers. I definitely agree with him. And now hopefully the listeners know it some regarding the Allman Brothers and the Big House. It's been a real pleasure, man. I really enjoyed this. This was fun. And next time I'm heading up to Atlanta, I'll have to pop in.
Steve, I can't wait. And thank you for the opportunity to come on. Very enjoyable conversation. I'm so happy for you that you're doing well and you're doing a good job with this. And, I talked to some other people that you've interviewed, Mike Marinelli from Columbus and how about Eddie Alvarez? I mean, you're doing a good thing, brother. So keep it up.
Thanks. Absolutely. That school's special, and it's definitely one that I owe a lot to. And, it's kind of cool to be able to showcase a lot of the alumni. I think more than half of my guests have been either alumni or alumni parents. And that's something that I want to kind of keep going forward. It's hard to get a hold of some of these folks. Marcus Lemonis, I still don't know how to contact him. I'm going to try carrier pigeon next, but, same thing with, Brian Regan, is another hard one to contact, right? Because people don't realize this, but that school has produced incredible alumni.
Yeah, we've done okay, haven't we?
Yeah. So, I'm definitely excited to release this episode, and appreciate you coming on, man.
And Stephen, again, and thank you for what you've done, and thank you for your service to our country. Something we all appreciate. And we need more of. And so you did your time, and you're doing great things now. And this has been a lot of fun, man. I'll do it anytime you want. Okay.
I appreciate it. Yeah, you're welcome back anytime.
All right, brother.
We'll definitely have to reconnect soon, man.
All right, Steve. Thank you, brother.
And that'll do it for another episode of the Know It Some podcast. My thanks again to Mr. John Lynskey for your time and for sharing all that information with us regarding the Allman Brothers. I am going to be going and listening to their discography all over again now. Folks, if you haven't done so already, please leave us a 5-star review on Podchaser, or you could do so at Apple or iTunes. Folks, I'll say that Podchaser is for both Android and Apple users. It's a newer platform, so it's easier for us to stand out. We're new to it, and we could definitely use some more reviews and some more 5-star rankings there at Podchaser. Do us a favor, please head on over and do that. And you could also help us out by following us on your favorite social media platform. We're all over social media at Know It Some Pod. That's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, you name it. We are there at Know It Some Pod, and you could always write to us, knowitsomepod@gmail.com. I love all the support. We have some really great guests coming up in the month of September, and so I'm very excited to say that we are starting to take off here, not just on the podcast charts, but really we're going to up our game and bringing you incredible interviews week after week. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next Tuesday.